see if I can get to this. I'm having trouble pulling stuff up on my cell phone. I got another text from the Charlotte Checkers.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I don't know if I got that one.
They have dollar hot dogs night this coming Tuesday, game 1 in Charlotte.
Ah.
And then Wednesday is dollar beers night. Which doesn't mean anything to me, but
yeah. Yep.
I've been keeping tabs on that Winnipeg series too against Nashville.
Oh yeah.
And Winnipeg is definitely deserving of being in the series lead, and Nashville's lucky they're not down 3-0.
Yep. Yeah, they haven't been playing all that great.
And I'll tell you, if they don't win this game tomorrow night, I don't think they're going to win. And that's a very, very hard place for them to win a game.
Yeah, you're right.
So,
all right. All right, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's get the show on the road.
All right, man.
All right. Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 35 of the Hockey Nuts Podcast. My name is Wayne. I'm here with Steve once again. This is Episode 80 overall. We're getting up there.
80. We're getting up to some high numbers, and I'm going to have difficulty counting one of these days.
Yeah, when we hit that triple digit, boy, that's going to be something else. It'll be probably sometime in the early fall before we hit that number.
That's right.
Because we do slow things down a little bit in the summertime. And, yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. It's been, a week since we last did one? We did one, last Wednesday, right?
Yes, we did. It's been 1 week. A lot of playoff action in that time.
Yep.
And we got some decisive answers in round 1 of the playoffs. And and now we have basically some surprises, maybe, would you say, in round 2, and some teams that are just red hot, playing great hockey right now.
Yep. As we recorded last week, there was actually exactly one game left in the first round of the NHL playoffs. Last week, that was that Game 7 Boston-Toronto, and spoiler alert, Boston won that game. So so they went on to round 2, and Toronto, had to go back home and face the seething hot lights of the press corps there in Toronto. And that brought us down to a final 8. So we headed into the second round, and most games have completed, or most series have completed 3 games already here in the second round. And because Boston finished so late, they got an extra day off going into the second round. So actually, they have only played 2 games since the end of that first round. So so Game 3 is actually tonight in about an hour, actually, as we speak. So we've got all that to talk about. We've got some transactions that have happened off the ice with some coaching and front office moves that have taken place around the league. We've got the draft lottery to talk about. We've got some international hockey to talk about. We got all kinds of stuff to talk about tonight. So let's get started, and we'll start with the NHL playoffs.
Yes.
So what we'll do is like we did in the first round, we'll go down through series by series. Now we're down to just 4 series to talk about, and the first one we need to talk about is Bruins Lightning.
Yes.
They have completed 2 games so far in this series. Boston won Game 1 in Tampa, 6-2. And Tampa then tied the series on the other home date in their building, and that was a 4-2 final in that one. I completely missed Game 2 because I was busy myself playing hockey that night. We had a championship game of my beer league that night, so I was busy playing that game.
Okay.
so all I saw was highlights of this game.
Yeah.
And as far as Game 1, though, I did watch that game in its entirety, and it was a great win for Boston to steal.
It was a shellacking.
Yep, to steal home ice.
Yeah, it wasn't even close.
Yep.
And you know, Wayne, we probably talked about this before. Really, Boston did what they had to do. They needed to do, and that's win a game in Tampa.
Yep.
If you can win 2 games on the home put, great. That's fantastic. You're stand a good chance of winning the series, but you got to win 1, and if at all possible. And Boston did that, and they really did it very easily in Game 1. They really beat the crap out of them.
Yeah, it seemed it was a lot easier than they thought, and I think what it came down to is that old rest versus rust debate. You know, we have this debate every single year. Is it better for a team to finish their series early and get those extra few days of rest? Tampa was off for what, 7-8 days,
right,
between the end of their series and the start of the next one.
Yep.
And then Boston had the shortest amount of rest of any team in the first round, and they had to turn right around. They did get an extra day in there, so it wasn't 2 days after Game 7. It ended up being 3 before they had to play Game 1. So yeah, Boston did get that extra rest, but obviously Tampa Bay came in more rested than Boston by at least 3 or 4 days. I don't have the exact count in front of me, but Tampa finished their series in 5 in the first round. Boston went all the way to 7, so that's at least 4 days right there.
Right.
And Boston came out, and they were sharp, and Tampa Bay wasn't in that first game.
Yeah. Boston really took it to them, and as I said, Tampa Bay, I think I said this in the last podcast, but they are not the mentally dominating team of, say, the Chicago Blackhawks of years past in winning the Stanley Cup, or definitely the Pittsburgh Penguins are a mentally Tampa Bay is they played very well this year, and they've been able to stay on top because they've had excellent play from their go-to guys, Victor Hedman, Steven Stamkos, Kucherov, guys that they are paying a lot of money to do well, and they're doing well.
Yep.
But they're not the mentally dominating team, at least I don't think they are, that say the Penguins are.
Absolutely.
They can be beat. You can get under their skin. You can knock them around and win a game or two.
Yep.
And really put them on the ropes.
Yep.
So, and Boston did that.
They did that pretty well in Game 1. And one of the things that Tampa Bay has excelled at all season long is their power play. And specifically about the power play is that long wing-to-wing cross-ice pass to either Stamkos on one side of the ice or Kucherov on the other for that one-timer. How many times this year did we see one of those two guys hitting that one-timer from the other side of the ice straight into an open net because the goalie couldn't get across?
Yep.
Now, obviously, Boston should know that play is coming, and they should be able to adjust to that and essentially, play in such a way that they're shutting down that passing lane.
Yeah.
And that's they did that a few times there in Game 1. Game 2, not so much, but because Tampa Bay, I believe, did get a couple of power play goals in Game 2, if I remember right. And it's now they head into Boston, and we'll see. These series, particularly against good teams like this, it's a game of adjustments. Let's see who adjusts more, or who adjusts better going into Game 3.
Yeah, that's true. It is a game of adjustments. Wayne, I I don't know. You have the box and one defense in basketball. I don't know what they call it in hockey, but if you have a guy on that power play that just sticks with Steven Stamkos wherever he goes, you might stand a good chance of shutting that one-timer that they seem to run quite effectively.
Yep.
Shutting it down. And, I mean, that's just I'm not a defensive strategist in the NHL, but I've seen that work where you really put the pressure on them, and your other guys fall in line, stopping whatever else they can stop. But maybe that's not the best way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah. And on the flip side of things, Boston, if you look at the statistics, Boston's record with the Bergeron line, when the Bergeron line can score, Boston's practically unbeatable. But if you keep that line off the board, Boston is a very beatable team. And they've proven that. Mm-hmm. In Boston's 3 losses so far in this postseason, well, they have 4 now. In their 4 losses so far in this postseason, going into the series, if you look at the Toronto series, Boston's top line with Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak. In the 4 wins, they had boatloads of points. I mean, it was ridiculous, like 30-something points combined in those 4 wins. In the 3 losses, 0 points.
Yeah.
And that continued to be the case to an extent in the Tampa Bay series. They got a boatload of points again in Game 1. Boston wins the game. Game 2, though, was the first case where Bergeron, Marchand line, and Pasternak, they all got at least a point in that game, but Boston still lost. And that's namely because essentially the lines other than the Pasternak Bergeron line got shut down. Mm-hmm. You basically got practically nothing from the second, third, and fourth line in that game. So,
right.
So it's just one of those things. Do you focus on shutting down that top line, or do you focus on shutting down all the other lines? And
that's good. Yeah, that's a good point, Wayne. I don't know. Here's the way I see it. Okay, I think Boston, they have the upper hand in this series now because of that win in Tampa. Hold serve at home.
Yep.
And I think they'll win this series.
Yeah, all they got to do
is a game in Boston, and they're in trouble.
Yep.
If Tampa's able to tie this thing back up on the home ice advantage, Boston, that's not good.
No.
But I think if Boston holds serve at TD Garden, they're looking good, real good in this series, and I would expect them to win it.
Yeah, at this point, all they got to do is win their home games. That's games 3, 4, and 6. Three of the next 4 games are in Boston, and they have the series is tied 1-1. So you win those 3 games, and the series is over in 6.
Right.
So I agree. Boston is somewhat in the driver's seat in this series as of right now, at least until they lose a game at home. And that's the old saying. Any team, whether you got home ice advantage or not, you are not in trouble in a series until you lose a game at home.
Yeah.
Once you lose a game at home, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. And even though they have the advantage, losing that advantage for them is big. They need that advantage against the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have a great team. They do. They have the players and the personnel there to put you away.
Certainly do. All right, so yeah, basically there's not a whole lot else to talk about there. There's only been 2 games in that series. Game 3 is tonight it'll probably start shortly before the end of this podcast. So yeah, there's not a whole lot more to talk about that. That series is tied up at 1, so let's move on to the next series, which is the other series in the East, and that's Pittsburgh versus Washington. And man, has this series been a fun series to watch so far.
Absolutely.
I've been able to watch 2 of the 3 games, including last night's game, Game 3. And although I still personally feel that Pittsburgh will ultimately win this series, Washington took the 2-1 lead last night by beating Pittsburgh in their own building.
Yep.
4-3. And it was kind of a stunner of a game, too, because the game was tied for most of the third period. It was tied 3-3. And then Ovechkin scored with less than 2 minutes left on the third period clock to take the 4-3 lead. It was a minute some left. And huge goal. And then they were just basically able to close out the game by holding off Pittsburgh in that one. But, that's basically – it's a classic steal of a game, I guess. There's no better way to put it.
Yeah.
Washington stole that game out of Pittsburgh.
It was. And that's a good sign, if you're a Washington Capitals fan, that happened.
Yep.
Because, we followed those guys through the thick and thin for years now, and you've seen Washington just – in some games they would have the upper hand and all of a sudden just choke. And Pittsburgh would just overwhelm them.
Yep.
But for them to score like they did in that game, in Pittsburgh was impressive, and the right guy did it.
Yep.
Ovechkin. So I listen. This to me is a surprise when I talk about the second round. And I'll tell you, I watched that first game, and Washington went up in that game, and I really thought, I went to bed late and I couldn't watch the whole game. When I went to bed, I was like, Washington seems to have control of this game. I think they're going to win. That didn't happen. Pittsburgh came back and won.
Yep.
But Washington played well in that game. And so I don't know. I look at this as, and Ovechkin is playing, he's playing his heart out. I see this as being something where if they continue to be aggressive against Murray and throw the kitchen sink at him, they're really aggressive in the offensive side of things, I think.
Yeah.
I think they stand a real good chance. And as I said, there's been years where I've said, hey, this is the year they're going to beat Pittsburgh this year. And it's never happened. So I'm cautious in saying that, but I still think that this is a surprise for me. I thought Pittsburgh was going to come out and just roll, and they haven't.
No, and of course they split the first 2 games. We haven't talked about those 2. Pittsburgh won 3-2 in Game 1 in Washington, and then Washington came out in Game 2 and beat Pittsburgh 4-1 in that one. So Game 3 goes to Washington 4-3. So Washington now has a 2-1 lead. I agree with you. Ovechkin is playing his heart out right now. He seems more desperate than I've ever seen him before to try to end this. I guess if you want to call it a curse, I don't know if you want to call it a curse or not, but to end this losing streak that Washington has against Pittsburgh.
Right.
I think Ovechkin wants it real bad this year.
Got a question for you. Do you think it's a fair question? The Capitals are 2 wins away from saving Barry Trotz's job. Think that's true?
Probably. Yeah, I would fair say that.
I think that's true.
I just hope that if that were to happen, if Washington were to ultimately win the series, that they get so overjoyed in winning against Pittsburgh that they fall flat on their face in the third round. Which could,
against Boston, of course.
Yeah. Well, one can only hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think it's a surprise. But Barry Trotz has to win this series. There's just he's staring down the barrel of a gun.
Yep. And
he's got to win this series. This is if he loses this series, I think he's gone.
Yep. Yep. But I agree with you there. And I've seen it before. Teams that do that, they're having trouble against one particular. I've seen Boston do that with Montreal, where they're having trouble beating them, then they finally get over that hump and beat them, and then flat on their face in the next round. So
yeah.
So, yeah, Washington would have to be careful about that one. But there's still a long way to go. Right now it's only 3 games complete, and it's Washington 2-1 over Pittsburgh right now. So they basically take back home ice advantage where they lost it in Game 1.
Mm-hmm.
And now we head towards Game 4, which is also in Pittsburgh. And then, of course, Game 5 comes back to Washington. So yeah, a long way to go in this series. One other thing on this series before we move on to the next one. About the play of Jake Gensel again?
Yeah, he is the goal. He is Crosby. Jake Gensel really played awesome last year. He really did, but he is duplicating that this year. He is just stunningly surprising me. You're reading his name is in the headlines just every single game in these playoffs. He has something to say about his team's effort.
Yep, absolutely. I just want, you see him play like this in the playoffs, and then you wonder where is it in the regular season.
Well, I think here's Pittsburgh with Kessel, Crosby, Malkin. Any one of them can dominate a game, but
true.
They found the guys that maybe Hornquist to a certain extent, Gensel, guys that they can go to when the focus is on those guys, Crosby, Malkin, and Kessel, that can put the puck in the back of the net. They don't have to worry.
And Washington is putting a lot of focus on shutting down Malkin and Crosby in particular.
Right. Absolutely.
And to a lesser extent, Kessel, because you can't shut them all down. Or at least it's extremely difficult. So, and that's leaving guys like Gensel, giving him a little bit more room out there to work, and he's making them pay for sure. All right, let's move on to the next series. We're heading out west now. We are looking at Nashville and Winnipeg. That series has completed 3 games, and the Jets now lead that series 2-1. Game 1 went to Winnipeg, and that was at Nashville. That was 4-1, and Nashville was never really in that game. That was all Winnipeg in that one. Nashville came out flat, and they never recovered in that game. Game 2 went to Nashville, 5-4 in double overtime. That game could have gone either way.
Absolutely.
Once you get into overtime, it can go either way. In fact, I believe Winnipeg had scored a goal at one point, and then it got washed out, didn't it?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yep. Or am I thinking? No, I'm thinking of the San Jose series. That happened in the San Jose series, and we'll get to that. I don't know if that happened in the Nashville game. I didn't watch that double overtime. I had to work early the next day, so I didn't get to see the double overtime in that one. And then Game 3 was another win for Winnipeg, and I thought this game was going to go Nashville's way because Nashville jumped out to a 3-0 lead in that game, and they looked dominant, and they looked like they were just going to roll to a huge win in that one.
Right.
And take the series lead. But then Winnipeg started scratching and clawing, and they got a goal. And then one right after another, they got goals number 2 and 3 to tie the thing up. And then each team traded a goal, and then there was a couple. Winnipeg finally took the 5-4 lead. Nashville ended up having to pull their goalie. Winnipeg got two empty netters to make it 7-4. So that game was a lot closer than that score indicates.
Right. Deafening crowd.
Oh, that crowd in Winnipeg,
every bit as potent as they are in Nashville. There's no question about that. They are. They may not have the seating capacity, but that crowd is still loud as can be.
Yep.
And Nashville's experiencing that what they threw at people last year, they're getting it right back at them in Winnipeg.
Yep. I would easily say that this series features the two loudest and most passionate fan bases in the playoffs right now.
Right.
In terms of in-arena behavior.
Right.
Now, anyone can argue, some of these fans are more passionate. Pittsburgh, has passionate fans. Of course, Boston does. They all have passionate fans, but there's nothing like these fans in Nashville and Winnipeg right now.
That's right.
The energy of the arena is, with these two teams, is absolutely, they're head and shoulders above everybody else.
Agreed.
But, it's fun to watch. Fun to watch this series because these are two great teams, and I think I might have commented saying, I think the winner of this series ends up in the Stanley Cup final. But, there's a couple other teams that might have something to say about that. But you could see that happening because statistically, these are on paper, the two best teams in the league right now.
Right. I agree. I think they're the best teams in the playoffs to this point. Easily the best teams in the Western Conference.
Yep.
And I think you're looking at one of those two teams is the Western. I think they'll handle Vegas. I think they could beat Vegas. Either one of those teams. But we'll see. Well, you got to play the games.
Yep.
No.
Yep. So right now, Winnipeg is ahead in this series 2-1. Patrick Laine has been struggling a little bit, but I've noticed that they're putting a lot of pressure on him. They're putting a lot of focus on shutting him down and basically forcing Winnipeg to try to beat him with somebody other than Patrick Laine. But he's still getting his chances, just not as many as he would otherwise. All right. I don't have anything else to add to this one for right now. So let's head to the last series of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and that is the San Jose and Vegas. Vegas Golden Knights are still playing.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable, and winning.
Winning.
They're not only playing; they're winning.
Yep. Right now, they hold a 2-1 series lead. 2 of the 3 games have gone to overtime. One was a complete blowout. Vegas came out in game 1 and just did an absolute spanking of the San Jose Sharks in game 1.
They did.
And that game was, I watched the first period of that game before I gave up and went to bed because it was 4-0 after 1. And I'm like, there's no way San Jose's coming back in this game.
Yeah.
And they didn't. It ended up 7-0.
They threw in the towel.
Yep. And then game 2 and 3 both went to overtime. San Jose won game 2, 4-3 in double overtime, and then they won. Vegas won the game 3, 4-3 in overtime. And Vegas, we thought, had won game 2 at one point. They scored, but it was called back due to goaltender interference.
Right. Yep.
So had that call gone the other way, we're looking at a 3-0 series lead for Vegas.
True. San Jose's lucky to be in this. They really are.
Yep.
They're very lucky to be in it. However, in game 3, they stood a good chance to win that game. San Jose, they played very well in that third game. They lost in San Jose, but they played well enough to win that game. They had their opportunities.
Yep.
And they blew it.
They just couldn't.
In fact, I think they should have won that game.
Yeah.
But Vegas came out on top. Now that San Jose here. This is another one where they have to win this game. If they lose this game, it's over. They're not going to beat Vegas 3 games in a row.
No.
And so the game tonight, 10 o'clock start. That game is going to be wild.
Yep.
Right from the drop of the puck, man.
Yep. It
Burns,
is.
Those guys, they're going to be out for this. This is a money game, and I would not want to miss that game. I have to. I got to get up at the crack of dawn. But that's a game I wouldn't want to miss.
Yep.
San Jose's backs against the wall. They got to win this game, and I think Evander Kane, all those guys, they're going to be out there playing it as if it was the last game of hockey they'll ever play.
Yeah, the Sharks definitely need to come out desperate tonight.
Yeah.
In that game, and You're right. If they go down 3-1 to Vegas, it's over because you're not going to beat Vegas 3 times in a row.
Yep.
That team just, they have that killer instinct that playoff hardened teams have. I don't know how, because they're just a collection of guys that were throwaways from other teams, but they've put it together. They put together a run. I still think Vegas is going to ultimately come out on top in this series, but you never know. And I keep looking to see if Joe Thornton might come back. I haven't heard anything in the last couple days.
Mm-hmm.
He's made a couple of appearances and warm-ups, kind of teasing the San Jose fans that he might be coming back, but nothing yet that I've seen. He would be a nice addition for the Sharks if he were able to find a way to come back.
Yeah, he would be, and especially there in San Jose in the Shark Tank. But as we've talked about on this podcast, I'm going to be surprised if he comes back to play next year. Maybe he will try to throw it in for one more year, but he's an ailing guy,
Well, he may be signed for another year, so I would think he'd probably come back for one more and then call it quits. But no, he isn't signed for one more year. You're right.
I thought he signed a 1-year contract.
He did sign a 1 year. Yeah. But he's not going to sign anywhere else but San Jose.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
I think he's at a point in his career he's just going to sign a series of 1-year contracts until he decides he's done.
Yeah.
But should be interesting to see if they do in fact get their backs against the wall even more so than they are tonight, if they find that he is miraculously healthy enough to play in a game, to see if they can try to steal a game or two here against Vegas.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, that's everything in terms of on the ice, what's been going on around the NHL. So we need to get to some of the stories that are going on off the ice around the NHL. And first and foremost, there's a couple of transactions.
Yes.
And one of them has, or a couple of them have a local flair to them. Just came out a couple of days ago. Ron Francis had his contract terminated by the Carolina Hurricanes on Monday. Francis has been removed as general manager and named president of hockey operations back on March 7th, although he really didn't have any responsibilities there. It's a whole weird situation. He's been the GM since replacing Jim Rutherford on April 24th, 2014. He had worked in various roles for the Hurricanes since he retired in 2006. Carolina President Don Waddell has been leading the search for a new GM, who will report directly to owner Tom Dundon. Francis spent 16 of his 23 seasons with the Hurricanes/Hartford Whalers, and is franchise leader in goals, assists, and points. And, of course, his number 10 hangs up in the rafters at PNC Arena. And this is kind of curious. I saw in the article, Joe Nieuwendyk also resigned as a Hurricanes pro scout and advisor.
I saw that.
He had 1,126 points in 1,257 NHL games and is a Hall of Famer. So he probably doesn't agree with the treatment of Ron Francis. That's the only way I can. It's the only conclusion I can come up with the Joe Nieuwendyk resigning, is that he didn't agree with the way they handled Ron Francis, and he decided to walk as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Could very well be. I'm not sure I understand. Basically, I can understand them terminating his contract because he's decided to take another position as hockey operations manager.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe that ruffled the feathers of some people, and Joe Nieuwendyk was one of them.
Yeah, well, it's all a weird situation. Tom Dundon obviously is he's in there getting his hands dirty right now, trying to really take the reins and really push the people that work for this organization. And he's basically cleaning house. He's basically saying, look, we're going to do this my way or see ya.
Right.
And I've heard through the grapevine that he and Ron Francis didn't see eye to eye on a bunch of things. Dundon wants to accelerate the whole rebuilding process, and Francis may not have agreed with that. And it ultimately costed him his job, and they made him president of hockey operations. But it was kind of just, he really didn't have any responsibilities, because whoever the new GM is going to be was going to report directly to the owner. When the president of hockey operations, I know for the Bruins, and for example, the president of hockey operations is over the GM. GM reports to him.
Right.
So, yeah, the whole thing's weird, just the way they're handling it. So
that's a good point.
He essentially, was moved. He wasn't fired, but pushed aside, given a job that's in name only, essentially. And then a couple weeks later, they just ultimately let him go completely. So, go figure. I don't know.
Well, but they didn't let him go, because he's now the president of hockey operations. So,
well, no, his contract was terminated this week. Francis's.
Okay. This is where maybe this is where I'm learning. Okay. My understanding was they terminated his contract as the GM, but that he went on and took the position of president of hockey operations.
Yeah, that happened on March 7th. But this week, they terminated his contract completely.
Oh, okay.
So he's now
gone
completely from the organization. That's
why Joe Lewandike left. Yeah, that's no doubt about it, Ben.
Yeah.
If you read that article, it was confusing to me.
Yeah.
That's not a guy that you should leave out of the, I don't know. Obviously, Tom Dundon didn't think he was doing the job. I mean, that's the writing on the wall.
Right.
That's the very first thing that strikes me now that I clearly understand what you're saying.
Yep.
Ron Francis just wasn't the guy there.
Yep. Yeah. Essentially, Tom Dundon lost confidence in his ability to rebuild the team. So, who knows? Maybe they'll find. Obviously, his number's retired there. He's still a highly respected member as a former player for the organization, and will always be. But I'll be curious to see how Ron Francis interacts with this organization going forward. It's just a strange situation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and in a related article, a couple of days later, let's see, or actually 1 day later, Rick Dudley was hired as Senior Vice President of Hockey Operations for the Carolina Hurricanes on Tuesday. So I guess is he replacing Francis, I guess?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Dudley, who's 69 years old, was Senior Vice President of Hockey Operations for the Montreal Canadiens for the previous 6 seasons. Dudley will report to Hurricanes President Don Waddell, furthering a relationship that dates to 1986, when Dudley was coach of Flint in the International Hockey League and hired Waddell as an assistant. They worked together most recently with the Atlanta Thrashers when Waddell, then general manager, hired Dudley as an assistant GM in 2009. Burke, who's 62, had been with the Flames since September 5th. Whoops, I'm got articles mixed up here. All right, so anyway, now Rick Dudley is now part of the Hurricanes organization.
Yep. And I think I don't know much about Rick Dudley, but I think he's facing an uphill struggle. They're going to expect some results, Wayne, and they're going to expect them next year. I don't think Tom Dundon is going to let somebody get away with 2 years of not making the playoffs. They are going to he might let somebody get away with 1 year, but by golly, there better be a tooth and nail fight right to the very end. I think they're going to want results right away from whoever is in charge.
Yeah, and it's just the front office right now is a total mess there in Carolina. It really is. And what also hearing through the grapevine is that they're losing a lot of candidates that are just simply being scared off because of what appears to be total chaos from the outside world. Now, for all I know, Dundon is running an extremely tight ship, and he's putting all his ducks in a row. And like I said, it's his way or the highway.
Yeah.
But on the outside, or from someone who doesn't know what's going on for real, is it just looks like total disarray and total chaos there at the front office.
Right.
So let's hope they get things straightened out before the draft, because it's a pretty important one for them.
You're not kidding.
And we'll get to that. So, all right, moving on away from the Hurricanes. Lou Lamoriello stepped down as general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but will remain with the organization in a role of senior advisor. When Lamoriello was hired back on July 23rd, he's 75 now. Wow.
Yeah.
July 23rd, 2015, the plan was for him to be GM for 3 years before transitioning to the senior advisor following 4 years. Maple Leafs president Brendan Shanahan said Monday he decided it was best to adhere to the original plan. So there was an agreement in place that he wasn't going to be the GM forever. He was basically going to get the rebuild started with the Leafs and then hand it off to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically decided that with that original timetable, they're going to go ahead and stick with that timetable. Lamoriello is going to step aside, hand over the reins to somebody else. Although, most people would agree that the Leafs are further ahead than most people expected them to be at this point.
Right.
They expected it to be a 4 or 5 year rebuild, and it's really turned into a 2-year rebuild.
Yep. And very well. You're looking at a team in Toronto next year who I could see them going to the conference championship quite easily.
Yep.
But I have no love loss seeing Lou Lamoriello step aside. I'm not a Lou. You're not going to hear me ever sing his praises. He will never be my pick of the week. Might as well just tell it like it is. But, I was surprised by that. I would have thought that because of the season that they had this year, that Lamoriello would stay put one more season. But I guess they feel that they can bring in someone who is younger.
Yeah,
I really think that's what it is.
Well, and reports are that there's 2 or 3 people that are in kind of lower levels of management within that organization that they've been grooming to possibly take over the job. They haven't announced anything yet, but and I don't have the names in front of me. They were in that article. The link to the show notes, or the link to the articles in the show notes here. But there's 2 or 3 candidates there that are possible internal candidates to take over the reins. But yeah, with Lamoriello being 75 years old, he's probably looking to slow down on her a little bit.
Right.
And being a senior advisor, well, he can do that from Florida, right? From a retirement home in Florida.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see him up in the booth doing games anymore.
Yeah. So, but more to come out of Toronto on that one, because obviously they now have to find and name a GM, and preferably do it before the draft. Now, the draft is still at least a month and a half away, so
yeah.
So they got time, but that'll be pretty high on the priority list for the Leafs to get that taken care of.
Yeah.
All right.
It's speaking of doing games from the booth, we segue right into that segment.
Yeah. So Brian Burke is leaving his position as Calgary Flames president of hockey operations and will join Sportsnet for the remainder of the Stanley Cup finalists or Stanley Cup playoffs as an analyst beginning this weekend. Burke, who's 62, had been with the Flames since September 5th of 2013 and hired general manager Brad Treveling on April 28, 2014. In Burke's 5 seasons, the Flames made the Stanley Cup playoffs twice. And this season, they finished 5th in the Pacific Division, 11 points behind the Avalanche for the second wild card into the playoffs from the Western Conference. And, of course, this was considered a very disappointing season for the Flames. They were expected to make the playoffs this year, and they just fell short. And did I ever tell you that I met Brian Burke once?
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was, I can't remember what year it was. He was, at the time, he was the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he made a trip to Orono, Maine, one lonely Saturday night. And he was sitting up in the stands, up near the top rows of the stands at Alfond Arena in Orono, Maine, obviously scouting a player or two for, in one of the games. And, yeah, we got a chance to talk to him a little bit. So it was kind of interesting.
That is cool.
Yep.
That is really cool. A long-time guy, if not in charge, definitely in the know for Team USA.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And their hockey building teams for the Olympics and others.
Yep.
Brian Burke, a big wig in that environment.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And I can't even remember Maine's opponent that night, but I believe he was scouting a few players on both teams. But yeah, it was quite a while ago because this is back when he was the GM of the Leafs at the time, and he just showed up at the Alfond Arena one night.
Wow!
And was watching a game from one of the last rows up at above center ice. And if you've been in that arena, you would know that that area of the arena is easily accessible to fans who are watching the game. We just happen to be sitting up there. I look over and I'm like, I said to my buddy, I'm like, that's Brian Burke. So yeah, quite interesting to see that, have him just show up there. I'm sure the main coaching staff knew he was there. They probably set him up with the tickets to get in. So,
yeah.
All right, so that's all the transactions I have for this week, unless you saw any.
No, that gets it in a nutshell, because there wasn't a lot, Wayne.
No. No, it's certainly not going to be any on the ice. That's for sure.
Yep.
Everything that's happening this time of year is going to be off the ice and mostly with coaching staffs. So, all right. Let's move on to injuries then. Chris Tierney will center the number 1 line for the Sharks against the Golden Knights in Game 3, or actually he did. I wrote this article, or wrote this before that game started, of the Western Conference second round at SAP Center on Monday. He replaced Jonas Donskoy, who sustained a lower body injury in a 4-3 double overtime win at Game 2 on Saturday. So I haven't heard what Donskoy's status is for Game 4, but he did miss Game 3 in that series.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Patrick Kane was suspended as well, and he came back in Game 3. So, yeah, the Sharks are just revolving door right now. And then Nico Hischier, an article came out this week that he will have his left wrist and hand immobilized for 2 to 4 weeks because of an injury the Devils rookie forward played through all season. He was a number 1 pick in the 2017 NHL draft. He won't need surgery to repair the injury, the Devils announced Thursday, but it will keep him from playing for Switzerland in the 2018 IIHF World Championship in Denmark this week. So he had 52 points in 82 regular season games, despite having this injury. And he was second to only Taylor Hall for points on the Devils.
Mm-hmm.
He had just 1 goal in New Jersey's first-round series against the Lightning, which was so 1 goal in 5 games. So clearly it was bothering him towards the end of the playoffs there. But to think that he got 52 points in 82 games as a rookie, playing hurt most of the season, should be encouraging for Devils fans.
Okay. Very much so.
So, and that was all the injuries that I had for this week.
And Evgeny Malkin was back for Game 3.
Yeah, he missed the first 2 games of that series, and he did come back for Game 3. So there's that in terms of injuries. All right, moving on to suspensions and fines. Evander Kane missed a game this past week. Of course, he's back from that suspension. It was just a 1-game suspension for basically a cross-check to the neck. I can't remember. I didn't write it down of who he hit, but he cross-checked a Vegas player in front of the net, and that earned him, because of the contact to the head, that earned him a 1-game suspension by the Department of Player Safety. And it came out today that Tom Wilson was supposed to have a hearing with the NHL Department of Player Safety today. I haven't heard the results of that yet, or at least I haven't seen any announcements. The Capitals forward was facing discipline for an illegal check to the head of Pittsburgh Penguins forward Zach Aston-Reese in Game 3 of the Eastern Conference second round. The incident occurred at 9:47 into the second period. There was no penalty on the play and I saw the referees got together on that play and discussed it, and apparently they decided that he got shoulder first, but Zach Aston-Reese ultimately left the game. The Penguins announced that he had a broken jaw and a concussion and will be out for the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that probably triggered the look from the league, because from one angle it looked like he got shoulder first and then the head. Mm-hmm. And then from another angle it looked like he grazed the shoulder and most of the contact was to the head.
Yeah. So
depending on what angle you look at, determine whether or not. So, to me, I don't think he specifically targeted the head. I saw the hit. I think he intended to get shoulder, but when he went to deliver the hit, he kind of slid off the shoulder and got him in the head. So anyway, probably Wilson, we're looking at a 1-game, 2 at the very most in that one when they come down to it, when they announce it. We should hear that announcement later tonight.
Mm-hmm.
All right. As far as other interesting stories that came across this week, there were a couple of coaching announcements that teams announced that were under heavy speculation of coaches that may have their job on the line. Guy Boucher of the Ottawa Senators and Todd McClellan of the Edmonton Oilers. It was announced by both teams that those 2 coaches will return to coach another season.
Right. McClellan doesn't surprise me. He really should have returned, even though they flopped this year. I agree they did. But I think you'll see Edmonton back in the playoffs again next year. I really think so. McClellan's a very good coach. But Guy Boucher, rest is a weapon.
Yep.
I'm surprised he's back.
Well, I think from what the article that I read, it looks like that Guy Boucher, in a series of meetings with upper management, probably had to agree that rest is not a weapon, and they're going to practice more frequently, and they're going to practice harder. It said it right in the article.
Yeah.
And they're going to give him essentially 1 more year to get back to basically what everybody else is doing, and then if, in fact, the Senators flop, then they will...
then termination is a weapon.
Yeah, then termination is a weapon, right. So, Boucher's coming back, but he is definitely on the hot seat. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
McClellan, if the Oilers have another season like they did this year, will certainly be on the hot seat. So the Oilers better come out and have a good October, because he could be gone by Christmas if they start off the way they did last year.
If they flounder and go down to the second or third worst team in the Western Conference, you're right.
Yep.
They'll axe him, no problem.
Yep. And they may do it mid-season, because there wasn't any mid-season firings this year, I don't think. Everybody waited till the end of the year to fire their coaches.
Right.
All right. Let's talk draft lottery. Buffalo Sabres, Carolina Hurricanes, and the Montreal Canadiens won the top 3 picks in the draft lottery.
Yep.
Carolina Hurricanes were the biggest mover. They went from 11 all the way up to 2. Of the 3. So,
and that's another puzzling reason why. I guess maybe it's because why are they getting rid of Ron Francis? Maybe it's because now that they know they're number 2, he's making a move to bring a guy in, his guy.
Yeah.
Pick the right guy for number 2, but I don't know.
Yep. Well, it's a very important pick because obviously the number 1 consensus, Rasmus Dahlin, a defenseman, he seems to be the consensus number 1 overall. Will probably end up going to the Sabres. They need defense help. So he will be a nice fit there. And from all accounts, he will make the team in the fall and should help improve Buffalo back on the blue line immediately. So I would expect Buffalo will definitely have. Well, they can't go any further down the standings. They finished in dead last. So, but this virtually guarantees that they will not finish dead last next year. Carolina Hurricanes are going to get a player as well. There's probably 2 or 3 players that are projected to be in that number 2 spot. Svechnikov, Tkachuk are the 2 names that seem to be talked most about as players that Carolina will target. But obviously nobody in the Carolina Hurricanes organization is talking, but I fully expect Svechnikov will be the guy that they'll take.
You do?
Yep. Because Svechnikov, of the players that are in that top 5 group, is probably the best pure goal scorer, and that's something that Carolina Hurricanes have been lacking for a while now. They also need a number 1 center, too, and Svechnikov is not that. He's a winger. But they also have a very good center coming up through the ranks in Martin Necas of the Czech Republic that they'll take another strong look at this summer in the development camp and in the fall in training camp to see whether or not he's ready for NHL. He was basically too thin, too light last year.
Right.
His hands and his speed were there. Necas is a very fast player.
Right.
But he just wasn't big enough to handle the pounding that NHL players go through. So they sent him back to his junior team in Czech Republic. So they'll take another hard look at him this year. If he makes the team this year, and you got Svechnikov coming this year, you got the makings of a very good scoring line there in Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were to add, let's say, Sebastian Aho to that line, you got Aho, Svechnikov, and Necas, that's going to be a fun line to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Even if it doesn't happen this year, in 3 years when those 3 players develop further, that's going to be a very fun line to watch.
Absolutely.
So, and then Montreal, they're going to get a very good player as well. Whoever they end up getting, that person will be able to help out that team immediately. It'll probably be a forward because other than Dahlin, the next group of players, they're all forwards. The next tier of players in the draft. So highly doubt that they'll end up taking and that's Montreal. That's something Montreal needs too. They had trouble scoring goals as well last year, so they need somebody who can put up some points, and they will in fact get that. So congratulations to those 3 teams. I'm excited for the Carolina, not so much for the Montreal getting number 3. Another story that came out this week, Patrick Waugh is returning to hockey. I don't know if you saw this one.
Yes, I think we talked about this one. Yes, sir.
Yep. He returned to the Quebec Remparts of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and signed a 2-year contract as coach and GM on Thursday. He also is a owner of that team. So So I guess he signed himself to a 2-year contract. And he was very successful as a junior coach. So,
yes, he was.
So, I think you're going to see more out of him. I guess the flame wasn't extinguished completely when he left Colorado. He decided he missed the game, and he's returning to coaching. So I expect at some point he'll return to the NHL.
Yep.
Another story came out this week. The IIHF World Championships are now less than 2 days away.
Saw this one as well.
Yep. The teams that are in that this year are, I'm waiting for it to pull up here. Let's see. Participating countries. We have Austria, Belarus, Czech Republic, France, Russia, Slovakia, Sweden, and Switzerland in Group A. Canada, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Korea, Latvia, Norway, and the United States in Group B. Denmark is the host country for this year's tournament. And from what I understand, the ticket sales have been very brisk. Basically, the teams in this tournament traditionally are made up of essentially NHL players, or at least for the big countries that have lots of NHL players to pick from. It's going to be NHL players that are playing for NHL teams that are already eliminated or were eliminated in round one.
Mm-hmm.
You may see a couple of players trickle in later into the tournament that get eliminated out of round two. Like Ovechkin has been known after Washington gets knocked out in the second round every year. He's been known to go back to Russia and immediately insert himself into the Russian lineup in the World Championship and play basically the second half of the tournament for them. So that has happened and could still happen. But for the most part, the teams will be made up of, at least for the big countries of Czech Republic, Russia, to some extent Slovakia, Sweden, Canada, U.S., Finland, those types of countries, maybe Germany. There'll be a lot of NHL players on those rosters.
Right.
So, fun tournament. I'm not sure what the TV schedule is going to be like for that. I haven't looked into that. I would imagine NHL Network is going to pick up a few of those games since there's less games for them to show in the NHL playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
They usually pick up a few of those games, particularly Canada and the U.S. in particular. But check their schedule, and you may be able to catch a few games in this tournament. It's usually a fun tournament to watch, even though the Americans and the Canadians don't take this tournament as seriously as the Europeans do. So I was kind of surprised to see Korea having a team there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I wonder if it's carryover from the Olympics or if Korea is improving on the international scale.
Yeah, I think it's carry because they teams that are playing in this tournament have to qualify for it because the IIHF has several different divisions, what they call divisions. And when your country's team doesn't do well in the top tier, because this is the top tier of this division, when your country doesn't play well, you get relegated to a lower tier division. Now, some of these teams, and I don't have the details in front of me, but some of these teams have had to play their way into this tournament. Korea is probably one of those.
Right.
Because that team Korea that played in the Olympics, they have a number of foreigners playing for them. Canadians in particular, there may be a couple of Americans that essentially were naturalized into so that they could play for Team Korea. There's not a lot of Korean natives playing on that team. So it's quite possible that they may have played their way into this tournament simply with taking that Olympic team and extending it out to this tournament as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't expect they're going to do much in this tournament against the big countries. That's for sure.
Yep.
All right, moving on. So, yeah, stay tuned to that one. All right, next story. The NHL is returning to China in September for a pair of preseason games between the Boston Bruins and the Calgary Flames as part of the 2018 ORG NHL China Games. The NHL and the NHLPA announced today. On Saturday, September 15th, the Flames will host the Bruins at Shenzhen Universidad Sports Center in Shenzhen. And on Wednesday, September 19th, the Bruins will play host to the Flames at Cadillac Arena in Beijing. The matchups in September will be the third and fourth preseason contest played in China following the 2017 NHL China Games presented by ORG Packaging, which included games in Shanghai and Beijing between the Kings and the Canucks. So not surprised the two teams they picked in this one. Boston Bruins players have been going for the past 2 or 3 summers. The Bruins have sent 2 or 3 players to China to participate in events to try to grow the game over there. And the whole thing paid for by ORG Packaging. ORG Packaging is also a major sponsor of the Bruins. They've got, you probably see it on their boards tonight. You'll see the logo of that company on their boards. It's been there all season long. So I'm not surprised that the Bruins are going because, you know, they've been involved in hockey in China for the past 2 or 3 seasons. I'm actually surprised they didn't go last year. Right. And then the Flames, well, they just simply, the connection there, ORG, I believe, is also a sponsor of their team as well. I believe they have their logo at the Saddle Dome. But the synergy there with the Flames is it's the same colored uniforms, the same general look of uniforms as the one team that plays in the KHL, the Kunlun Red Star. Right. The same colors. So very easy to, put that correlation together. So, yeah.
Mike Keenan's team.
Yeah, right. So, but they're just 2 preseason games. All that means is Flames fans and Bruins fans, you're going to have to get up in the middle of the night to watch those preseason games if you want to see them live. All right. Next, the last story I have for this segment is Jim Montgomery is rumored to be hired as coach of the Dallas Stars. It hasn't been confirmed, but TSN is reporting that Jim Montgomery will be the coach of the Dallas Stars, which actually I was surprised by that when I heard that. He's coached the past 5 years at the University of Denver. He told his players on Wednesday that he has agreed in principle to become the Stars coach, according to the Denver Post. Montgomery declined to comment when reached by a newspaper. Among players Montgomery has sent to the NHL are Devils defenseman Will Butcher, Bruins forward Danton Heinen, Ducks forward Troy Terry, and Panthers forward Henrik Borgstrom. Montgomery had 2 interviews with the Panthers before they hired Bob Bogner and spoke with the LA Kings prior to them hiring John Stevens last year. He played pro hockey for 12 years, including 122 NHL games with the Blues, Canadiens, Flyers, and Sharks, and Stars. But his career was mostly an AHL career. And then, of course, before that, he played at the University of Maine, captaining them to their first national championship back in 1993. So he's basically, the thing with him that probably should get Dallas Stars fans excited is that he's won at just about every level he's been at. Right. He's won national championships in the NCAA as a player. He's won as a coach. Before that, he was